directed at the individual and speaks to the innate experiences of the human being, their strengths and weaknesses. Thus, every reader has the opportunity to discover through the intuitive perception if what is stated is the truth. Combining with matter of fact reasoning, a complete world picture arises where there is no separation between the visible world and the great world beyond the five senses, nor any separation between scientific and religious striving for knowledge. I'd like to give you a couple of quotes from the author of the Grail Message, Abdrushin. The hearer and reader of my lectures should always work within himself, keenly probing and building bridges from one lecture to the other, as well as out into the great and small world happenings. Only then will he be able to understand the Grail Message and find that it gradually shapes itself into one complete whole, without leaving any gaps. Again and again in all the happenings, the reader will come back to the basic features. He can explain everything without having to change even one single sentence. The word of the Grail Message lives, so that it permits only those people who really carry the honest desire in their souls to find abundantly. All else is automatically rejected by it. For the arrogant and those who seek superficially, the message will remain the book with 7 seals. And I'd like to give you one more quote from the author. I wish to fill the gaps which have so far always remained unanswered in the souls of men, and which never leave any serious thinker in peace if he earnestly seeks for the truth. So, dear listeners, I want to remind you again, the topic for discussion tonight is emotions. And you can join in the discussion by contacting us on this number, which is UK number 079 444 31366. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 00 44 79 444 31366. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. I'm going to just try to see if we can get our colleague Mena back online. I'm just checking if he's coming back now. Let's try one more time. There we go. Okay. It seems that we can't find him at the moment, but hopefully he will join us soon. So, Gregory, I did a little bit of research today for this topic, although it's such a massive topic, I must say. And I like to start with this, what I discovered in the dictionary about the meaning of emotions or emotion. It says there are two definitions there. One says a strong feeling deriving from one's circumstances, moods, or relationships with others. And so just say that again. The definition of emotions in the dictionary. So it gives you two of them, and one of them is a strong feeling deriving from one's circumstances, mood, or relationships with others. Let's look at that one first, Gregory. Would you say that's correct, or is does it sufficiently explain it? What an emotion is?
The expressions you just quoted only describe it partially. It doesn't tell you precisely or comprehensively what emotion is.
So, Okay, so don't answer what it means yet because I want to go through the second one now. It's from the dictionary as well. It says instinctive or intuitive feeling as distinguished from reasoning or knowledge. So the meaning of emotion is instinctive or intuitive feeling as distinguished from reasoning or knowledge. What do you think of that one? Or what do you say about that one?
Again, that only points to what emotion is, but it remains a pointer. It doesn't give precisely what emotion is.
Okay, so let's go little by little. Is emotion something sort of physical or is it spiritual? I think if we just break it down a few words, because it's such a big subject, this topic, and I think it's good we just go do through it gradually rather than just jump into some big definition and then we just sort of lose ourselves. So, would you say emotions are physical, somehow physical, or are they non-physical? Let's say.
Again, these words are the effects of emotion. The effects of emotion is not emotion itself.
Hmm.
So when one is talking about physical or, or spiritual, whatever one, again, these are effects. Whereas the topic is emotion. So we must go about it in such a way as to give as near precise as possible, such that there will be clarity and comprehensiveness.
So, would you like to give a, like, as you say, precise explanation of what is emotion?
What one is striving to do here is to examine the expression or the word emotion itself. When one just mentioned expression, definitely emotions like that of sadness or of happiness, these are expressions. Because we know they are expressions, then we must ask ourselves, what is the impression? It is that impression that gave rise to these expression, emotion. It is that impression we are sort of trying to grasp properly. Again, we have the word emotion. It means there must be some inner motion, there must be some motion somewhere. That is one part. The other part is that emotion is triggered. What triggers? Once something is triggered, there is a response. So the expressions which have arisen is what we refer to as emotion. But the inner one, it must be that something has happened, it has triggered some other thing, and that what has been triggered is now the outer expressions which we see, that being of sadness or of happiness. So, strictly speaking, emotion must have been some impressions, which impressions one is referring to as inner mobility, inner movement. And this inner movement must have.
Oh. Gregory, just sorry, if you can hold on. I think we've lost you there. Um, hello, Mena? Hello, Mena.
Yes.
Okay, we've lost Gregory now, so let me get him back.
Okay.
Okay. Let's hopefully. Mena, just tell us where you are and how's the weather where you are.
I'm on the. I'm still in the hotlands, and yeah, the weather is very cold now.
Okay. Welcome then. We just started the show, and Gregory's been talking about what is the meaning of emotion. And unfortunately, we just lost him, and hoping I will get him now.
Okay.
Um, Gregory, let me just see if we've got.
Hello?
Oh, Gregory, you're back. Apologies. We just got Mena on the line, and it somehow cut you off. Apologies for that. So I know you were answering the question about emotions, and if you could just start again, not from the beginning, sorry, just from where you were. Um, I think you might have realized we cut you off. So,
Well, I couldn't remember when it was
okay,
cut
where you
off.
got cut off.
So,
So it was, let's say, uh, you talked emotion being emotion, um, uh, and I think you were going to go further from about that, a movement, emotion being a movement. So maybe from somewhere from that point, if you could continue there, from there.
well, I think one has to start. One's stress that sadness or happiness, which is only an expression, a bodily expression of what is going inside one. Because it's an expression only comes into existence when there is an impression. That inner impression most likely could be the mobility, the movement, the agility of the inner personality. That being the case, something must have triggered that inner mobility, or that personality in its activity must have sensed something and then responded to it. What one is saying here is that there must have been some trigger somewhere. And in that trigger, there is a response. And it's that response which we now have, which we now call emotions, which are simply expressions, bodily expressions, either of sadness or of happiness. So the inner meaning of that one emotion has to come from inner movements which have been triggered or which are responses to what has been triggered. And that is why you have either happiness, the state of happiness, or a state of sadness, or even that of anger. So one has to see that there is something going on with the personality, that state in which the personality has had a response to its inner movement or motion. That is what now gives or paints the picture of emotion.
Thank you for that. So let's say somebody receives some good news and that makes them feel happy, and or they get bad news and then they feel sad, and so and so in a way that looks like you're the emotion is coming through, like you say, a response from um, an impression, or an
Yes.
impression
And
of. Sorry, gone.
yes, in you like you described it, someone receives, in quotes, some good news. A very typical mundane one is you never thought you will win the lottery, and all of a sudden, something they said, "Oh, your number won the lottery, and you have millions of pounds." The immediate emotion is that of elation and happiness. So, what triggered it? You find there's a trigger, and that trigger, you now have a response.
Now,
It is that response
yes.
that one is referring to as the happy emotions. On the other hand, you have the case where one has lost something along the way, and you respond to it, and that's emotion is that of sadness, or oh, how come I lost some? So you find that there's is a something triggers the emotion, whether externally or internally.
Thank you for that. So, I'm trying to also go into about basically if emotion is actually a spiritual thing or is it a physical thing, a mental thing, and the physical. Um, so yeah, I know you've given the sort of the process of it, and so people say, "Oh, this I'm speaking from my heart," or "This is a feeling from my heart," and so when the people refer to that from their heart, I would say that doesn't sound something physical really, because it's not the physical heart we are talking about. Um, so it sounds to me um, it's a spiritual emotion. Emotions are spiritual, uh, but I think you tried to say you said that that is not the full story. Um, so could you go further on that? So where does this emotion?
Emotions, they do, depending on the trigger, they do come from different sources. In the first case, the example we gave, the physical one, where one so-called lottery, that's an external bit of information which, in response to it, one has some quote some form of happiness. There could also be some other triggers, which trigger could be that in one's reflection, suddenly you have an answer to a problem which had been bothering one over years. Or it could be, it could be over 10, 20 years. All of a sudden, you have a solution. So that one is sort of mental. There are also emotions which may also have arisen out of temperaments, being temperamental. You might have the way emotions may arise from a child is different or from that of an adult or of a middle-aged person or of a very elderly person. These are different stages where the temperaments come in, and one then responds to it. Definitely in summer, one can find the emotions in summer are that of, youthfulness. You want to go there, you want to enjoy yourself and all that. And whereas when it comes towards winter, everybody is sort of calming down. You're not planning to rush outside to do anything. So it's a state which the personality, the inner personality responds to. Again, you have the scenario where the human spirit in its activity is able to find a solution to a particular problem. Maybe it has all of a sudden has gone through some experience where it was able to sever a particular connection and it feels lighter. On the other hand, you have scenarios where due to one's blood radiation, one is able to perceive things in a calmer and much quicker way. It's able to to perceive of the existence of the beings of nature. In these cases, you find that one becomes so elated. These are emotions. These are responses which the spirit, you know, has generated, and it makes it feel very high and is grateful. Sometimes it makes it feel very low. But whatever the situation, be it joy or sorrow, the human spirit, the inner personality, is able to learn the necessary lessons and move on.
Thank you again, Gregory, for your answer there.
Yeah,
Mena, you would like to come in?
yeah. Thanks, Gregory, for that wonderful. I mean, it's a very clear definition, of or explanation of what emotions could entail. But I'm looking at a situation where a personality could, just be in a state of joy or in a state of unhappiness, just by nature. Because we refer to some people as, fun, gay, and some, like, we have the saddest. What? How do you see people, or how do you classify these people? What impressions are they reacting to?
Could you repeat
Because
your question, please? I didn't get
yeah,
it.
yeah, when somebody is, naturally sad, or naturally, joyous, what impressions are these people responding to?
First, it is completely out of the question to say one is naturally sad. That has never been the case. It could be periodically sad over a short period or a long period. One cannot say when you say naturally sad means the whole of one's existence one is sad. Such has never been the case and will never be the case because the scenario is the personality, even before it became a personality, has started from the state of an unconscious germ and striving in true experiencing to become a conscious personality. So, and that will be progress. So, to say naturally sad, it's an expression one should try not to use. But if it is periodic, it all depends on the activities it is engaged in and how it's responding to these activities. Whenever the spirit is able to swing in such a way that the activities are of benefit to it spiritually, the activities are of benefit to the personality, then the state is that of joy. If, on the other hand, the activities are not of benefit, as the case of time being wasted in going to war to destroy other people, as in the case of where jealousy or all sort of ignoble things. Those scenarios are not of benefit to the personality, and in response, one might say the personality becomes sad. But one should be careful. What is exhibited intellectually may seem to be happiness, whereas that is not actually the case. So it is the spirit which is alive. That is what we're referring to, not the sort of happiness which many people have when they see some other people sinking and they are joyful that, in quotes, their enemies have met their end.
All right, thank you. I'm also looking at a scenario where people come with different names, like someone who comes with the name joy or happiness. Does that have any effect on the person's emotion? Uh, Does it relate?
Many, many who, in quotes, come with their names, these names have been woven for them um, temporarily for a particular earth life. And for some of these names, they are to strive to ensure that their life will be joyful. As you will find in most cases, names which are given to children are beacons which help those personalities to strive to the peak of that name. On very rare occasions, you hear, if at all, parents give names to their children as sadness, wickedness, all this sort of, well, I personally haven't heard. So these are names which partially had been woven in the past due to the activities of the personality concerned. The parents only sense this and, you know, verbalize it such that that personality is conscious of what he's doing sooner or later to attain to that state.
Thank you, Gregory. Dear listeners, you're listening to Blessed Radio. It's the Tuesday night spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdul Sheen. And the topic we're discussing tonight is emotions. And you can join in the discussion on this UK number, which is 079 444 31366. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 444 31366. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you are interested in getting a copy of the Grail message or want to get some more information about the Grail message, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. Gregory, let's talk about one particular emotion, which is, you could say, the biggest emotion, love. And being on the earth, people fall in love, they say. And there's different types of love, you know. There's love between parents and their children, or brothers and sisters, or, you know, in the family. And you can say that is like an emotional one. And I mean, that is an emotion. But then there's when there are, let's say, couples and so on, like romantic relationship, there's also like a sexual relationship there. And some people seem to connect this sexual, I'm talking in a physical way now, and with the emotion of love. So, is there any some connection like that? Because obviously, you don't, in quotes, have sexual relationship with other family members or everybody just because you love them. Uh, so, is there some, let's say, misunderstanding there about what is love, and when somebody says I've fallen in love, um, and somehow they come out to think that is a something a sexual attraction as well.
The first thing is to understand is to ask oneself the question, is love an emotion? If it is, then how? It's only when one understands what it is, then one can classify it as an emotion. For love itself transcends what many refer to as human emotions. What you just described are different gradations of, in quotes, human emotions. And sometimes there is the misnomer doing something which is called love, whereas it has no love at all. Ask yourself the questions when you meet all these people who, at their age, force themselves on little girls and they say they are in love with them. Is that really love because they have forced sexuality on these children? Or some of the so-called religious bigots, so who, in a war situation, decide to impregnate women? Were they in love with them? These are the questions which each personality must ask themselves. If in the process of examination, one comes to the conclusion that the mating, or whatever you care to call it, does not reflect any love, then one has to throw it away. For these acts were carried out to punish the person. Does love punish the way the human beings have carried it out? So it must be that these human spirits, or generally human beings, misunderstand what love really is. It is not what they imagine. On the one hand, they have their imagination. On the other hand, they have their feeling. But love is not imagination. Love is not a feeling. It is something completely different, of which maybe a discussion can center around it. So, what human beings, what many have classified as in the classification of love as an emotion, that is completely wrong, because they do not understand what love is all about. For it is true love that here we have the opportunity to develop from the state of unconsciousness as a spirit germ to the state of consciousness, and then the state of self-consciousness. Love builds, love supports, it doesn't destroy. So it doesn't take advantage of the other. So the concepts which have been formed are so terribly distorted that it bears no relation to the love, which love sustains the whole of creation, sustains the whole of nature. At best, they may call it their personal instinct, which instincts they do not have control over. And because of that, they now call it love. Such distorted concepts must be done away with.
Thank you for that answer, Gregory. But I want to just clarify. Some of what you were talking about love was not really genuine love in the first place. Like you say, people are abusing children, and but let's take an example of some where there is a genuine love between a couple, let's say, and so would. I mean, I sort of know your answer, but I just want to clarify that if there's a couple with a genuine love to each other, would you say that um,
It's
is it
placed.
yeah? I mean, is that any, like I said, with the sexual attraction that people have? I mean, so I'm picking now an example where it's genuine, right? Not something which is uh, there's an abuse going on or
Yes,
manipulation.
there could be genuine love between a father and a son, a father and a daughter, a mother and a son in the so-called family circles. There could be genuine love for a country. There could be genuine love in one's profession. These are very different from what has been distorted. Unfortunately, the word love, as seen by many, is tied only to the so-called instinct for procreation, whereas it is furthest away from that. What you would then have most of the time, if it is genuine love, which only means that supporting one another in striving towards noble goals, which noble goals would only mean upbuilding towards the sense as shown by the by the laws of creation, through which everything came into existence. So you might have the love for your country, which only means supporting the constituents of your country in order to help them to ascend or to know something better. You might also have love for the environment. That means you want to support the environment so that there is a swinging in balance between receiving from the environment and giving back to the environment. That you do this to the environment doesn't mean there's any sex between you as a personality and the environment. So that's what love, as described by human beings, has been terribly, terribly abused. And that's why it makes no sense. Genuine love will support for an upbuilding, never to destroy. Genuine love will not take things for granted, only wanting to take and not give in return. Genuine love, the so-called sex thing has been so badly abused. What the animals do in procreation is natural. It is very sad that human spirit will even sink to the level of the animal. They who claim to be superior to animals and even sink further, distort the language and call these things love. So, like I said, these things are so very different. Love supports, love upholds. It is love that upholds the universe. And that is why the human spirit has the opportunity to develop, which development only assures it that it will experience and come or become self-conscious on the long run.
Thank you for
Okay.
that. Go on, Mena.
Yeah, Gregory. Yeah, there are sometimes when people become infatuated, they have that very strong feeling of love towards another. Well, could that feeling be classified as wrong all the time? Because I take, for instance, like, somebody has just found a partner, and at the first instance, the person is, well, heads over heel, in love with the person, would you say it is always wrong, that
You, you,
approach?
you, you yourself already mentioned it, that it's infatuation.
Yeah.
Infatuation has now been taken as love. It's like you have an attraction. Whenever you have an attraction, it doesn't mean that that attraction must be either magnetic or electrical. What is seen is an attraction, and that attraction, because it's interpreted in a completely, or most of the time, distorted way, it is now classified as love. These attractions, on many occasions, could be for the coming together to achieve a particular goal. However, those people who are involved in the attraction do not yet realize this, and therefore they go to excess, and they now say, "Oh, I cannot live without this person. I cannot do this," and the first thing they see, basically, once it's between a man and a woman and they are about the same age, is sex. So on the one hand, we have the intellectual sensing, and it is pursued along that. On the other hand, there is also the spiritual sensing. Coming together to achieve a particular goal is helpful in building relationships. But you must ask yourself, what relationships is built when, in the case of war, one person sees another, the next thing is to jump on top of her or on top of him and sex. Even the animals don't even go, that far. So there must be clarity in these matters and ask. And each person must ask themselves, what is it? Why do I feel so attracted to this person? If there is that attraction, then basically there must be some goal which needs to be achieved.
Yeah,
Thank,
but before you go further, Gregory, can you see someone's spiritual state, like, your spiritual gravitational level, as does it impact your emotion? Is that clear?
Yeah. Said one's spiritual state, does it
Yeah,
impact one's emotion?
yeah,
Of
like,
course it does. For someone who has just started, let us say, if you take a child, the emotions of the child at that level is different from the emotion of an elderly person, whereas the elderly person will, to a large extent, reflect. The child, depending on the temperament, will just, act without any guile. So, whereas the state of the child is that he's still trying to make use of the physical body that it now has. And therefore, it doesn't bother about many things. Many of the questions it will ask are very simple and genuine. On the other hand, the so-called elderly person is all very different. The sort of questions it may ask may be complicated, with all sort of calculations. So the level of the personality also affects its emotion. Emotions in the sense that we have the inner man in his activities, such that whenever he tries to understand or to undertake certain other activities, it will do it in such a way based on what it has already accumulated, based on the experiences it has accumulated. And therefore, there is the gradual reflection. Whereas the person who just started not long ago does not have that innate experience to rely on.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, because I'm looking at it. You're still looking at the emotions in terms of age. Well, yeah, could you also look at it in terms of how someone stands spiritually? Like, somebody could be of a low spirit. Somebody could be dense, so to speak. And it's I think that person could be drawing from centers that are also dense. Would not be true. And then somebody who is actually high spiritually will also draw from nobler power centers. Yeah.
Of course, that is true, and that is very true. Um, what then happens, like you mentioned, is that the higher the spiritual standing, then the higher that personality is able to draw from sources which are nobler. And therefore, the sentiments or the emotions that is able to display are those of a higher standard. On the other hand, for one who has sunk so low spiritually, the sources that is able to assess are those of a low nature, those of a bestial nature. And therefore, what you find is that he's able to draw from the neither regions the sort of activities it will wish to engage in or it strives to engage in is that of warfare, which will destroy, which will not help to build up. So you find that those terrible impressions, most of the time, like you will find nowadays in the so-called internet or in the cloud, where people visit areas of very dark and terrible impressions, they imbibe these things. And before long, what then happens? They express themselves in these emotions which they have absorbed, albeit because They were looking deep within those regions where they wish to satisfy themselves due to their homogeneity. So your observation is very correct.
Yeah. Okay. Let's look at the case of the Bible, where the torment which the Israelites, no, the Egyptians inflicted on the Israelites, but that in itself helped the Israelites to mature. So why do you not think that the Egyptians have to be given some credit for that?
That's a very good question. As with anything, what counts is what lies behind a particular activity, the motive. The motive of the Egyptians was not to help the Jewish race to mature. Their motive was to hold them in slavery. It is the motive that determines whether an activity is noble or is not noble. The same Egyptians who themselves will never wish that they are held in slavery. They hold people in slavery. They wanted to keep them in slavery. So whichever way they look at it, that motive was wrong. So how can we now praise such a wrong motive? Because other people, in seeing what their motive are, extricated themselves and cried out for help. And in response to their cry, they received help through Moses. So one cannot give credence or praises to the Egyptians, whose real motive was to keep others in bondage, which bondage they themselves would have rejected. For whatever is good for the human spirit will help the human spirit to ascend. They themselves would have been happy if they themselves would have been happy if such wickedness, such tortures were perpetrated on them, then maybe they would have learned different lessons. So there will be no thanks to the Egyptians. However, the group that was subjugated to slavery, they had the opportunity to start fighting back so that there would be deaths. But they sought for a different help other than the mere fight back in arms.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that brilliant answer. But the Jews would not have matured if not for that torture they received from the Egyptians. How,
Again, that is not correct. Or if one looks back at the beginning, many of the Jews at that time had in their quiet reflections come, to the correct conception about the power that streams through creation. That is what hastened their inner maturity. They knew of some, not all the processes, and were maturing from time to time. What the Egyptians then did was to suppress them, because the Egyptians themselves did not at that time, had not at that time come to that same type of maturity as the Jews. If they were at the same maturity, then they would have known that depriving people of food and using them as slaves is wrong and contrary to the laws of creation. Ignorance of the law, like he said, is not an excuse. But the Jews at that time, realizing most of these things, held on firmly to the concepts which they have perceived, although these concepts had not come to clarity, absolute clarity within themselves. On the other hand, the sufferings which they had to endure only helped them to hold on to what they have, and they didn't give that up.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Gregory.
Yeah.
Yes. Dear listeners, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday night spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdushin. And the topic we're discussing tonight is emotions. If you're interested in, if you have any questions or comments, you can contact us on this UK number, which is 079 444 31366. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 444 31366. Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're interested in getting a copy of the Grail message or want some information, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. That's www.grail, GRAIL, message, MESSAGE.com. And just to remind you, Bless Radio, you can listen to Bless Radio on this website, which is www.blessradio.co.uk. We are also on tunein.com. Just go to tunein.com and then search for Bless Radio, just one word, Bless Radio. And then also on YouTube, you can hear us live. Go to youtube.com, then type in the search Bless Radio 1, the number 1, Bless Radio 1, and then space live stream. And then 10 minutes after the show, you can hear the recording of this show or any other show that we've done. So again, it's on YouTube only. So again, youtube.com, then search under that Bless Radio, then space Grail message, and then the topic of the show. For example, tonight's show is called Emotions. The topic is emotions. So yes, Gregory, we talked at the beginning of the show or earlier in the show about temperaments, and so I wanted to ask you, if somebody is of a particular temperament, does that mean they're tied to a particular emotion, or is that just when I say tied, let's say they have a tendency to have a particular emotion? So let's say some people are, when you think of in a way countries, some countries it seems they're very cheerful people despite the suffering, and it's like they're always smiling and happy. So the emotion is happiness, you can call it. So is there like a tendency of a particular emotion through the a person or people's temperament?
As you will find, there is no uniformity as to the behavior of a people depending on how they stand when it comes to regard to temperament. If it is mentioned that people of the South Sunny neighborhoods have a temperament which is like that of children, means they are quite happy. It only means that there is the tendency That doesn't mean that everyone within that group must behave the same way. There are a lot of variation even within a group um, when it comes to temperaments. Like you said, there are about four temperaments, basically, or sometimes 8 or 12. But that is not the focus of our discussion today. Many they have the time, or they should find time to examine the work in the light of truth, and they will find the lecture on temperament and how it's connected with so many other things. That will be very helpful, and that's why we have these discussions. But to answer your questions directly, temperaments they, they tend to affect the group in such a way that is the level of maturity that then counts even within the group. So you have a group and the tendency that this is how they are likely to behave. There are some who in a different group who stand before their activities, their action, ready for action. But again, you have sort of variation between all these groups. But like one said, please don't take my words for it. It's better to go to the Walk in the Light of Truth Grail message, and all that one needs to know will be there.
I've got a follow on from what you've said there. Let's look at families, and they say like father, like son, and so what I want to ask you: are emotions inherited within, let's say, family? Uh, um, yeah, uh, is there some? I was going to say genetic, but it sounds a bit weird to say genetic. But is there any connection? Like I said, there's a saying like father, like son, and so does it mean, let's say, if a person is brought up in a family which they're always angry and shouting, that the children will inherit that too, emotion?
Good question. The word's inheritance has to do with genes, and it is the vibrations of or the way the genes have been built up, the genetic makeup that also affects the blood radiation. It is the blood radiation that determines, to a large extent, this like father, like son, or like mother, like daughter. That is from the earthly point of view. However, from the non-earthly point of view, it is the so-called the attraction of homogeneity. So there must be something which is common in the spiritual sense or in the non-earthly sense that bring families together. And therefore, that saying will be correct. From the earthly point, what is inherited are the genes. And the vibrations of these genes, the way they operate, is such that they also affect the blood radiation. And you then have that, in that case, that tendency is now shared with siblings or with parents. For what is inherited is that of the body, not that of the spirit. And that which is inherited in the body affects the blood radiation, the vibrations of the blood. Again, what one has mentioned are only tokens. There are lectures in the Walk in the Light of Truth, which also throws so much light, the abundance of light in all these discussions.
And thank you. I've got again a little bit another question, sort of following on from what you're saying. Staying with families, or just in general now. So we have children who seem to display their emotions quite openly, you know, unrestrained, let's say. And then when we become adults, we seem to be more controlling in our emotions. So, is there something? Um, I don't know if I want to say it's something good or bad, but it's more like um, when we, as children, um, is it because we are learning to have the emotion there that we are sort of so expressive, and then when we become adult, we think, oh, it's not a good idea to show your emotion and show your true self, and so we become more restrained. So, what's going on there between children and adulthood that we behave differently in with our emotions?
There could be many things, but one line of investigation most likely is that as a child, the sort of temperament of a child is different from the temperament as one grows up and one gets into a different age. And in that case, the personality that's, oh, that is the human spirit, responds to this temperament, which temperaments affects people at different ages. And when the personality responds to this temperament, you find that there's a change. Whereas as a child, one has that carefree attitude. But as it grows up, it matures and learns that you cannot carry the carefree attitude of a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old to adulthood, where one is about 20 or 20 something. So there is a change. So what is going on is that there is a change in maturity. There is a change in the blood radiation. There is a change in the way the human spirit has absorbed experiences that has come its way. The cumulative effect is what is now being displayed.
All right,
And
but the only thing, okay, if Christ, Jesus Christ was said to have, asked people to behave like children, what do you think he was looking at?
When it was said, behave or be as children, it's not like
Yeah,
behave like children.
yeah.
It means the simplicity which children ask questions. A child will approach you and ask you what it needs at that particular time. An adult will approach and ask what it does not even need, and we ask so many other questions. So there is confusion. For the spirit to mature, it needs to take things gradually and simply. The child's behavior at that stage is very pure, is unadulterated, there's no pretense. A life without pretense and doing things, saying what you mean and mean what you say is better than a life where what you say is not what you mean, and what you mean is not what you say, like you have in politics. So it should be very clear when it says be as children, means be as simple, all right? Do not make, find as much difficulties, find less difficulties as you live your life. Don't complicate things. The child will not complicate things because it will only ask for or request for what it needs, not what it doesn't need. If you can go to the elders and you'll find that they accumulate so much of the things they will never use, and then they leave it to rot. So the difference is very clear.
So yeah, so that means there are certain behaviors that, like what Saad is um, asking, that there's certain behavior you as a child which you have to carry all through your life, up to all through to adulthood. Is that not correct to say?
What it means that whatever is good as a child, be it purity and simplicity, it means it has to be preserved to adulthood. For most of the time, when it comes to the adult age, simplicity is thrown over the board, purity is thrown over the board. Simple intuitive perception is not even considered. It is then you have the intellect coming to play a large role. Whereas with the children, it is not so. Whatever they have in their heart is what they say. Their behavior is true.
Thank you
It
for
then
that.
yeah, therefore goes to say that certain emotions with the child exhibits are meant to be carried through lifetime. Would that be
Can you come
correct?
up with the question again?
Yes.
Because I
I said there are
don't get.
certain emotions which the child will display which are meant to be carried out through its lifetime, isn't it?
Well, if you understand what one referred to as emotion, that there is the expressions which we call emotion. There is the meaning, which is the inner impression. And there is something which triggers these emotions, so called, which trigger this impression. The spirits radiate in its movement, in its motion. And when the spirits radiate, there are reflections, there are echoes that come back to it. So in its activities, these echoes is what it uses to determine whether it brings happiness or sadness. This exhibits throughout all one's existence, even in an earth life, even as a child. The case of that of a child is that at that tender level, everything is true. The intellect has not set in to cause so much confusion. That is the big difference.
Yeah, yeah. I think yes, you make it because if I give a child a candy, he's going to be very happy. But it gets to a point. If I give a candy to an adult, it's going to first of all ask me, "Am I a child?" You see the difference?
May
So
you, I don't get the question you are
yeah,
asking.
I said if I give a child, if a child runs up to me and I give the child a candy, the child will be very happy. I say, "Oh, thank you." But if a adult walks up to me and I give him a candy, he's going to first of all ask me, "Am I a child?" But
Yes,
yeah, was would
there's nothing wrong with that because the child trusts without question. But you, who is the giver, what motive is there in giving candy to the receiver?
okay.
So it has to depend on the motives. The
All right.
cornerstone, the lever that operates is the motive. Whereas in the case of children, their motives are pure. The case of the adults haven't gone through so many deceptions. Now here you come and you give it. The first response is, why are you doing this? So
Yeah,
it is the
becomes
motive.
intellectual. Yeah, becomes
Correct.
intellectual. All right.
Thank you, Gregory. I want to ask question about emotion in sort of different context now. So when we having a debate or discussion, and there's a let's say heat. I don't want to call it a heated discussion. Let's say somebody standing for one point, another person having an opposing point, and and you can get emotional. Somebody can get emotional there. When that happens, Gregory, does that mean the person is now lost their objectivity and impartiality, or they become prejudicial in their sort of pursuit of making their point? So so what I'm trying to say, obviously emotions of happiness and sadness have their place, but when we are having a conversation to make a point, it could be a family matter, it could be politics, you're discussing something, and then somehow you have your point and you want to stick to that point, or to strongly make that point, and you become emotional. So would that mean that you, from that moment when you become emotional, you cannot act anymore objectively in a non-prejudicial, impartial way?
Not at all. It only means one is unable to express one's perceptions very clearly. Because of that inability to express oneself, then other emotions come in, that of tenderness, or for some that of anger. It only points to one's inability to express oneself. Not only emotion in the sense of sadness or of happiness, but also of destruction. You have situations where many who suffer from that inability to express themselves, and that inability builds up. For this builds up due to their personal indolence, albeit they have not taken the time to examine deeply enough, and therefore they hold on to very narrow intellectual interpretation. And those who do not go along such directions, they view with suspect. And to eliminate such suspects, they go to extents which they would never have gone, albeit because they suffer from this complex, the complex of not being able to express themselves clearly enough for others to understand. It becomes one-sided because they themselves may have the position and authority on their side, and therefore they may use the machinations of the state or of their authority, whereas the other person may not have those authorities on his side, so it's unable to use it. So one has to look at the overall picture, the all-embracing picture, and know that such behavior is only due to that person's inability to express himself or herself, and has now interpreted that inability in such a way, in such emotional upheaval, as far as going to violence, whereas there are others who will interpret it or exhibit it in sort of tender sadness. Some maybe that of happiness. So it all varies. It depends on how the personality responds to these challenges which has come forward.
Okay. Thank you, Gregory. I'm looking at your explanations, and I'm looking. The picture I'm creating in my mind is that there's somebody who is unable to express himself. Now, pressure builds up in him, and there's an outburst. will that person be drawing from himself alone, or something else has helped him to come to bust out?
Could you repeat the question? Because I couldn't
Yeah,
get.
yeah. What you said. Somebody could become emotional if he's unable to express himself. And I'm looking at a situation where somebody begins to build up perhaps anger in himself, and the pressure builds up to a point where it finally comes out. Would that person be acting independently? Would it just be his own thoughts that have gathered to release that emotion, or something else has helped him?
Actually, at no time are we able to build up on our own thoughts alone. When we have such a scenario as you have just described, there are influx of similar thoughts, which, in accordance with the attraction of homogeneity, these thoughts stream towards him or her because he himself has provided the seed. And therefore, these thoughts stream and they reinforce his own that is already there. And therefore, you now have such a terrible buildup, and it then breaches the inner protection. That means the inner protection are those other thoughts that could have helped to calm him down. He then loses that support, and you now have the exhibition of such a violent behavior. So his thoughts are not alone, although they form the seed that has created or that has enabled others to rush towards it. And uh, it has now been reinforced. He now sort of express these emotions or these sentiments that you mentioned.
Yeah. So that means, the emotions of love, joy, hatred are not self centered.
The emotions of love, joy, or hatred, like you mentioned, are only starting points. One has to act as a starting point for him or her who wishes joy must first strive to be joyful, such that other will rush towards him. For him or her who wishes real pure love, not fake or that one which is not genuine, you yourself must provide the seed. That is how it goes. It cannot be otherwise.
Thank you, Gregory. Dear listeners, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday night spiritual discussion program from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdushin. And the topic we're discussing tonight is emotions. And if you'd like to join in the discussion with any questions or comments, the number to contact us here in UK, it is 079 444 31366. And you can call you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 004479 31366. Now, I've got somebody in the studio. Somebody, yes. In fact, it's our next presenter, Brother Siayome. How are you, Brother Siayome?
I'm very well, Saad.
I should just let him come near to this mic so he can. I don't know. Yeah, let me put him on the mic. Hopefully they can hear him.
Yes. How you doing? Good to be here while you're here
Yes,
this
good to see
time,
you.
this
We don't see
evening.
you that often recently, so it's nice to have you here.
Uh huh. Yes. Um, Interesting conversation here. Spiritual discussion. How are you, Brother Gregory?
I'm all right, and you?
I'm well, thank you. And
Thanks.
no, and to your other guests you have there.
Yeah, it's Mena.
Hi,
Mena.
Mena. How you
Mena.
doing?
Yeah, yes, I'm still here. Thank you.
Okay,
Hello, how are you?
that's good. No, just come in. I'm not gonna take up your show, my brother. I just interesting that topic about emotions. So I have a question like, where would you say emotions begin, and what are emotions actually?
Okay.
You said, where do emotions begin?
Yeah, what generates emotions, and therefore, then what would be the source of emotions? Because you have uh, quite a spectrum of emotions, and we can say emotions are energy in motion. So what I'm asking is, where would you say emotions begin, and
Good
what are
question.
emotions?
Yeah. Well, I heard it loud and clear, and thanks for asking this question. At the beginning, one mentioned that things, these motions are triggered sometimes by external means. Take, for instance, you are reading a book or you are watching a film, and all of a sudden you feel happy because you've seen what has happened. That's an external means. But these emotions, this, if I reframe it, energy motions, to be more precise, one should never forget that energy is spirit. That is the key. Energy, I repeat, is spirit. However, we are talking of energy being spirit, which spirit also take on the human form. The inner core of man is spirit, therefore is energy. The vibrations of the spirit, the vibrations of the personality, that personality which we now call spirit, sends out waves. The effects of this wave, when it reaches us, these effects now come out externally as expressions. These expressions are what we refer to as emotions. For emotion is an expression. When one is happy, you can see it in one's face, in one's laughter. Laughter is an expression. Smiling face is an expression. When one is sad, it's also an expression because express, something has to be pressed out. What has been pressed out was an inner energy movement or energy motion. For now, one will stop it there. More one may find in the work in the light of truth, the grail message, where you yourself must examine every expression to find the inner impression that caused it. That is the task for anyone who wishes for real knowledge, for he or she becomes convinced, not taking things for granted.
Okay, I hear you. Um, uh, there was part of the question I didn't feel was answered, but I like your expression and articulation of emotions. As I was saying at the beginning, lining up the question, that you also did pronounce that energy in motion is where we get the idea of emotions. But I was asking, like, where is what generates emotions? And I just wanted to hear your answer. I mean, I'm aware of it, but I just like to hear other views. And I just wanted to ask that question specifically, you see?
Thank you again for that. And along the line, one stressed that the personality in its inner movement generates these impressions. And once these impressions come out, they become expressions. It is the expressions we refer to as emotions. So on the one hand, the inner personality, the inner man or the inner woman, in its movement, the effect comes out as emotion.
Mm.
How's that for you? Is that maybe you want more, or you're thinking?
Well, the thing is, I could elaborate. I feel to go into, but as I said that I got my show after. I
Yeah.
do appreciate what Brother Gregory has said,
Yes.
but it could, you know, I could go into more elaboration, I suppose, and again
Yes.
take it somewhere, um, take
Yes,
it somewhere
I
else,
agree
and I want
with
you to
you.
stay
Yeah.
in tune with what
Yes.
Yes,
you're
Stay with
doing.
our
But
focus.
if I may
Yeah.
come in,
Yes.
I
Go.
agree with you. But as you will know, it is good to take one little step at a time rather than going on and present 10, 15, 20 steps. It will confuse many, for there are many listening to this program in different parts of the world. So it is good to start with tokens and build on tokens rather than to explain so much and people will lose sight of the beginning. That is why that which is beneficial is given in bits of steps. For whoever wishes to climb a mountain must take the first step and the second step by step, higher and as they go higher. Else, if you now remove these steps and say, okay, jump to the top of the mountain, it's an impossible task. So, in conformation with what many will have to understand, tokens are given such that on the long run, each one will examine for himself or herself and build up. Then they become stronger. That is why you find that little steps are discussed, not the whole lecture.
All right, Gregory, can you quickly answer? I know the time is going past now. So why do adults, see reason in controlling their emotions?
Mena, just a
You say,
moment. Mena,
why?
one moment.
Yeah,
Sorry, one moment. Mena,
why do adults see? Yes, go on.
Mena, just can you speak up a bit more because there's
Yeah.
I'm struggling to hear you actually. So
All right. I
please
said,
repeat that question.
why do adults see reason in controlling their emotions?
Adults see reason in controlling their emotion because they want to be able to reflect on what had happened. Take, for instance, someone feels the emotion of anger and he doesn't control it. This anger is so much in him due to lack of self-control. What then happens? He takes a gun and shoots. So that is a lack of self-control. So as an adult, as one matures, he or she has the need to control that emotion, which to a large extent is negative. For if that were not done, one can imagine the case of many who had those negative emotions of destruction. If it wasn't controlled, they themselves would have been destroyed. So the first key is self-control. One has to know or has to first learn how to control oneself, has to control the impressions that assail a particular personality. For if you do not control these impressions or these emotions, how can you then mature? It means before long, you yourself may dissolve in it because there's no control, there's no restraint. One may use the word instead of control, but restraint, because there's the need to reflect over it very carefully. But like we said, more of this can be found in the work.
Thank you, Gregory. Now, some people are depressed and sad, and they take drugs. I don't mean drugs like illegal ones, I mean medicinal one, and to sort of control their state. And so, would you say that's really a way to deal with that? When somebody's so long time sad and depressed, and do you need to take some external sort of aids to help to overcome? Well, I don't know if it's overcoming. It looks like just keeping you restrained from being out of control, really. So is that a way to deal with your sadness or depression, or beneficial way? Let me say, is that beneficial?
You mentioned word sadness or depression. Well, most of these medications are temporary. They are not permanent, or they do not offer a permanent cure. But the sad story is, once one's body becomes used to the imbibement of these drugs, before long, one adapts to these drugs. And when these drugs are not taken, it falls back to the initial state it was.
Sorry, just one moment. Sorry, there's some background sound going on. I just want to, if whoever's not speaking, just put yourself on mute. I will just say it like that. So, Mena, you go ahead. I think you want to say something.
No, I'm okay. Yeah. So can you carry on? No,
go ahead. Okay, you don't have anything there.
The question, because I shut off and my mic. Yeah, so that.
I see. Okay. What else? The other thing I want to say is, let's say somebody is reading or giving a talk, and and sometimes you can sound dull and dry without any emotion, and so should one always have, when we speak, to be alive, to show that you're actually alive, should when someone's speaking, should that always be with some sort of emotion behind it, or can it be some sort of, I'm going to use this word neutral, I don't know if this makes sense, because so without it, sort of almost without emotion, I guess. Should we speak like that? Almost, let me say, give example like a news reader, although it's very hard to say they are neutral in that way, but they are, so that's where their job is, to speak in a neutral way when they're reporting the news. So should one express somehow emotion when they are like a newsreader or giving a talk, or can it, or is it okay to be neutral, sort of?
Depending on the source, many of these spring from the intellect, where things are only repeated, things which have been written out, like the case you mentioned, that of a newsreader. For one to be able to add emotion to these things, one must have examined that topic in details, examined not only with the intellect, but also with the spirit, one or with one's intuition. That means the topic or the subject is absorbed to the intellect and passed on via one's intuition to the spirit, which spirit is now able to examine it and weigh it in accordance with its maturity and the laws of creation. Only then is it able to respond with a strong wave of answers. Those strong waves now come back as intense emotions, not that of crying or not crying, but that of strict logic, that of strict pronouncement, which pronouncement must also accord with the laws of nature which are expressions of the laws of creation. So that emotions spring up doesn't mean that person has to be crying or has to be sad or happy, but can be also very firm. These become very firm emotion built upon strict logic, which logic does not violate the laws of creation, but which logic shows the firm connections between the different parts, and above all, tells where things have sprung from, what could have caused it. At the same time, there is the support or the advice that each must also examine to have, to come to clarity.
Yeah. Um. There's some. Can I carry on? Yeah. There's some. Right there.
As you well know, the connection between the physical body and the non physical body, which is referred to as the soul, the earthly connection that made this possible is the blood radiation. That blood radiation, depending on the fineness of it, the fineness determine how the soul is able to connect with the body to ensure a balance and harmony. If the illness is not that of the physical body, then it is something else. But most of the time, it is the physical body that is unable to act in such a way that there is harmony between the soul and the physical body. There are cases, in fact, many cases, where the physical body is excellent. However, the blood radiation is not good enough to be able to work in harmony with the relations of the soul. The question is, what should be done? In most cases, the diet which a man takes in contributes to it. In some cases, some drugs may help. There are other cases where indolence of the spirit comes in. With the case of the physical body, with regards blood radiation, which blood radiation varies from childhood till old age. Some drugs may be of help, but there are others who are able to perceive the actual cause of the problem and are able to report as to what is the key. What should one do in this situation, in that situation? Each personality or each observer has to take time to observe and keep records and see what helps at what times. Only what helps to create harmony is good for the soul. Again, a lot of this can be found in the work in the light of truth. However, the observer must seek much, much deeper, not superficially. One can also mention that take for people, for instance, people who take alcohol. Alcohol in those days was called spirits. The reason being that when you consume alcohol, before long, it changes the radiation of the blood, which radiation of the blood now impairs the harmony between the so-called astral body or soul and the body. So erroneously, this alcohol was referred to as spirit, which already tells us that it is what we have consumed or something physical, one way or the other, which we have taken to our system that has caused some of these problems. Again, as the human being mature from one age to the other, there is also a change in the blood radiation. Much investigation needs to be done to have precise results. What must be done, how it must be done, can be found in the work in the light of truth, the grail message. However, every sentence, every expression must be taken into account in order to understand the comprehensive picture, such that when man takes the right step, he or she will be of help to those who are really in need.
Thank you for that. Go on, Mena. I know it's only a few minutes to go, so please go ahead.
No, but yeah, I think you should just round up now because we just a few minutes. But thanks for that explanation. I just wanted to, Gregory, if you could just give us, you did connect emotions with self-control. If you could expand on how one can be in control of his emotions. I mean, what is the right way to um, deal with emotions?
Well, the way it has been mentioned is as if emotion is that which, when it comes to, in quote, negative emotions, we lose control. Whereas with positive emotions like happiness, when we win the lottery, there's no problem. You can start jumping up and doing all sort of things. Even then, there has to be control or there should be restraint. Um, the idea of restraint is not to exaggerate. For when the inner personality is in quotes happy, if there are no restraint, the likelihood is that things become exaggerations. All right. Imagine that means that happiness is now exaggerated externally because this now becomes emotion, external emotions. Someone will win the lottery and keep shouting in the street from one end to the other. Oh, I've won this, and then puts himself or herself in jeopardy because other people will now hear and say, "Oh, so you have this," and then, depending on the country, they send people to go and collect the money from that person. So the idea of self-control or self-restraint is to ensure that there is no overt exaggeration of these expressions of emotions, but to minimize it so that it's not become like a feverish scenario. And in keeping such under restraint, under control, it is something like keeping silence, which silence now ensures that pressure is built up. Pressure is now built up because of self-control or self-restraint, and it therefore attracts many more other things which will make the spirit happy. That's the one sensing is why there's the need for self-restraint or self-control.
Thank you so much, Gregory. We've come to the end of the show, listeners. Hope you enjoyed the show. I'm just going to ask very briefly for Gregory and Mena to say goodbye. So please, Gregory, go ahead.
Well, I wish everyone a beautiful week.
Thank you. And Mena?
Yeah, me too. And well, the focus is on the message, the grow message. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, listeners, thank you. We just remind you the aim of the show is to introduce you to the Grill Message Show. We encourage you to go and examine it and pick it up. We'll be back again next Tuesday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. as usual with a new topic, which we'll discover when we get to that day. So all the best, everyone. Have a great week. And hold on for Brother Siayome. He's next. Thank you.